This is one of those like just getting life done sort of days. And I think most of us, it looks like our names on Zoom look like our real names, but if your name on Zoom does not look like your real name or the name you're going by for this class, please just put your name in the chat so that we can make sure we get you recorded for attendance. Oh, we have two Jennifers. I've been alerted. Now we have a Jennifer Joyce and a Jen Van Brunt. Both Jennifers accounted for. Okay, awesome. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. So welcome everyone. I mentioned this already, but just to say it again for those that have just joined us, I know this is kind of a hard day for a lot of folks, and you might have other things going on at home. If you need to step out at any point, please do. Remember, we always have recordings. You can watch the recording and tell us a fun fact. Like, I know folks might be juggling multiple things. So just do what you need to do to like stay sane. That's totally fine. Today we are going to first be hearing from Paul, and I'll introduce him in a second, about integrated pest management, and then we will be hearing toward the end of class about getting started with office duty training. So you'll be hearing more about kind of how you get trained for office duty, how you start thinking about doing that. We do ask that everyone go through that training so they at least know what office duty is. It's kind of one of the backbones of our program, and we want everyone to at least be familiar with it. So Tina will be by to tell us about that. We will still try to take our break halfway through. It'll be a little bit shorter than usual, but I'll let Paul dictate when that break happens. Paul, please find a break time. You know, when maybe enough people start zoning out or turning off their cameras, all of a sudden you notice that's the time. So today, do we have any questions about any of that or anything else? You can always put it in the chat or holler. Okay. Cool. All right. So today we are going to be hearing from Paul McKenzie. Paul is a retired extension agent, which is very exciting for him. He actually did previously work in Durham County before he worked elsewhere. He is absolutely phenomenal, really fun to work with. And I just found out this morning that we are both coming to you live from our sewing rooms, which I really appreciated learning about Paul. So, you know, he's a man of many talents. So with that, Paul, I'm going to hand it off to you.
You are very kind, Ashley. Thank you. So good morning, everyone. Very pleased to be with you. So I guess I'll just jump right on into this. I'm the right window here. Okay, how's that look, Ashley? Okay.
Good.
All right, good. Ashley, let me know if things start getting a little bit laggy, because as I mentioned, I've got a pretty good internet connection, but it can get bogged down, and sometimes it helps if I turn off my video. So just give me a heads up if that happens.
Will do.
And a shout out to the incomparable Charlotte Glenn, who developed so many invaluable materials for Master Gardener training and Master Gardener service in her many-year career with Cooperative Extension. Currently, of course, the statewide Master Gardener coordinator. But she's just a terrific person, and she has done a lot over the years for agents and volunteers. So, you know, I'm going to be talking about pesticides, and that's something that people have sometimes strong feelings about, strong opinions about, and so I think it's pretty reasonable for you to wonder, who is this guy that's talking about this? And so, of course, I'm a retired extension agent, but I did work for a pesticide research firm in like 1992 for about 3 years. I was not like a scientist. I was just like a basically a file clerk. That's what it boiled down to. But I did get a lot of exposure to what pesticide research is like in the regulatory side of pesticides. And it really, really informed my career quite a bit, and gave me a lot of insight into the pesticide industry. So I do have that background. And then I worked as an ag extension agent for, I think, a little over 25 years. And of course, had the uh, amazing pleasure and privilege of working with many great Master Gardener volunteers over the years, including many in Durham County, and just an absolute joy and pleasure. But then I did a lot of other things too, as ag extensions do. And one of the things I did is I trained literally hundreds of farmers and landscapers and gardeners on pesticide use and safety. So that's where I'm coming from. So, in the spirit of starting with the end in mind, here's what I want you to leave with today. Here's the main points. If you take nothing else out of this presentation, if you need to leave after 10 minutes, at least you'll have this. But here's what I want you to leave with. In that 25 plus year career as an extension agent, I saw and talked to people about a lot of plant problems, and the vast majority of them were avoidable. And of course, people call me or Ashley or you as a Master Gardener volunteer when you're in the office or at a plant clinic and say, what's wrong with this plant? And so we need to take advantage of that, teachable moment, as we say, and how do we avoid this problem next time instead of trying to find some quick solution? And when you're trying to solve those plant problems, when they do occur, it's really important to start with an accurate diagnosis, and we'll get into some more detail about that, but how to get that diagnosis. And you'll look at this, and sometimes when you're looking at a plant problem, it could look very obvious, and sometimes it is very obvious, but it's easy for things to look like things they're not. So there's many situations where it looks like a fungus problem, but it's actually a nutritional problem, or it looks like a fungus and it's actually an insect. So we got to get an accurate diagnosis. Another thing that I want you to leave with is that these are valuable tools. All of these pesticides that we use, they are valuable tools, and I'll kind of make a case for that. And they can be used safely. Big part of that is following the directions. But they can be used safely, and in particular, the products that are available to homeowners, home gardeners, are relatively safe to use if we use them properly. Tend to be, low toxicity. Probably some of the household cleaners you use are actually more dangerous than some of the pesticides that people use. So they can be used safely, but big but, they should be used sparingly, correctly, and as a last resort. So that's what I want you to leave with today, is that we can use them. They're valuable tools. We can use them safely, but we need to be, approaching it with a philosophy of using them as the last resort. Now, this is quite interesting because I found this bottle out in the woods like a week ago, and I immediately thought of this class. So it's hard to read, but the picture on the left, it says, the top line says it's, and then below that it says hot shot, which of course is so this is an insecticide bottle from who knows how many years ago. It's made out of glass, so that dates it to some extent. Hot shot, that's still a brand that we see on the shelf today. And actually the active ingredient in this product is one that's still available, if I'm not mistaken, to home gardeners and farmers. I can't remember what it was. I did look at it. But I think the relevance of this is that I think part of the issue with the way people think about pesticides is we have this history of there'll be a product that was used, and then new information will come out, and like there's this history of new information coming out and realizing, oh, this is a really bad thing to use, like DDT, for example, okay, or some of the, there were some products that have been used over the years that are very toxic, and so we have this mentality, or we have this mistaken notion that the products on the shelf today, that there's this risk that we might use this product, and then next week or next year, some new information comes out and says, oh no, this is a terrible product. We should never have been using this. And there's the history of that having happened. But, I think what you have to recognize is that science is cumulative, and we've gotten a lot better. I mean, the tools we have in science are so much better than they were 50 years ago, yeah, or even 20 years ago. And so when there is a change or new information comes out, it tends to be incremental rather than, at least as far as I think in the pesticide industry, it tends to be incremental rather than, some dramatic. And so that gives me a lot of confidence that the products on the shelf today are good and reasonable to use for the most part. And again, if we follow the instructions, we can use them safely. So, all right. Let's see, I need to pull up the chat. I want you to type into the chat and indicate whether or not you use pesticides. Just a Y or an N for yes or no. And let's see what we got. Okay. I'm not counting specifically, but it looks like it's, let's say, half and half. All right, so let's just say about 50% of you answered no. Now, those of you that answered no, let's dig a little deeper here. Do you use this product? Those of you that answered no, do you use this product? So if you answered no and you use this product, you have to change your answer to yes. If you answered no and you use this product or something similar, you have to change your answer to yes. If you answered no and you use something like this, or ant baits, anything like that, then you have to change your answer to yes. If you answered no and you use this product, you have to change your answer to yes, because legally this is defined as a pesticide. If you answered no and you use flea and tick products for your dog, which if you have a dog, you probably should. I know my vet strongly advised me to use, the topical flea and tick treatments. Those are pesticides. So you would have to change your answer to yes. If you use these products or similar, then you have to change your answer to yes. And this is what you have to keep in mind about using pesticides, is that they have a value. And my wife and I, we spend quite a lot of time hiking out in the woods. And, these products have been on the market for, decades, and widely studied and determined to be safe. But ticks carry diseases and chiggers are a terrible nuisance when you get into them, and these things help. Mosquitoes can carry diseases, so it is well worth taking whatever tiny little risk there might be from using these products to protect myself against ticks and chiggers and mosquitoes. So if I went back and asked that question again, which I suspect the percentage of no's would drop dramatically. And so that's the point that I wanted to make. And so the information here probably applies to nearly all of you, if not all of you, as far as what we need to think about when we're using them. Right. And so, one of the common misconceptions about the term pesticide is that when we say pesticide, we're only talking about products that kill insects. And so pesticide, the last part of that word, side, to kill, like homicide or whatever. And then the word pest. And, from a scientific standpoint, from a legal standpoint, we include weeds, fungi, insects, rats. Those are all considered pests from a legal scientific standpoint. So pesticide is that broad term, and then there's all these subcategories like herbicide, fungicide, insecticide, rodenticide, etc. So that's a point of confusion for a lot of folks, and why somebody might answer no and then realize they need to change their answer. Okay. All right, here's a true or false question. Organic gardeners do not use pesticides. You can probably guess where I'm going with this. And of course, the answer is false. Organic gardeners often do use pesticides. And organic farmers use pesticides, but they are restricted in the kinds of pesticides they can use to products primarily that are naturally derived. And this is actually one, that's a good example. It's a flower extract, and it is naturally derived, but it is still something that has to be used with caution. And all of these natural organic pesticides, with some exceptions that I'll get into, have to be used with the same care. You still need to read the instructions and follow the label and all that good stuff. So, and it could have potentially off-target impacts just as other pesticides do. So we need to be aware of that. All right, so integrated pest management, IPM, it's a term we use a lot in extension and agriculture in the world of master gardener volunteering. So let's break that down. And I always like to start with this quote. Insects and disease should be seen as indicators or symptoms of stressed, suboptimal plant growth rather than as enemies to be destroyed. The obvious solution is to focus on correcting the growing conditions. From Elliot Coleman, I think he's considered one of the forefathers of organic gardening, for parents maybe, of organic gardening. So again, where we can avoid a problem, that's a much better approach. And here are the principles of integrated pest management that I'll go into. Of course, first is prevention, monitoring, then identify the problem, assess the damage or the cost or whatever, and then decide on your countermeasures. And these are IPM principles according to Paul McKenzie, to be clear. And these two, the prevention and the monitoring, I would say, are, kind of the foundation where we need to focus our attention and energies, because if we can prevent and monitor and catch things early, then we won't. The countermeasures are a lot easier and have less impact. So, by the way, Ashley, I don't know how you normally handle questions, but if folks put questions in the chat, you're welcome to interrupt me and bring those to my attention, or I'll try to stop in a few minutes and see if anybody's got any. Okay, so let's start with, when we go through these principles of integrated pest management, we want to start with prevention. And again, this is the foundation. And one of the most important ways we can prevent pests is through plant selection. So for example, if somebody really, really wants hybrid tea roses, they're basically deciding to spray insecticides and fungicides, because that's what it takes to grow reliably, blemish-free hybrid tea roses. There may be some exceptions. I'm not a rose expert, but you can go with one of the modern cultivars that have been selected and bred for resistance, like the knockout roses, although I know those have some issues. That can be grown, some of the old-timey variety. There are cultivars of roses that we can grow that don't have so many problems and that we can grow. So we can make that decision up front to reduce our need to use pesticides. Again, if you're wanting to grow good quality backyard apples, you're kind of signing up for pretty intensive insect and disease sprays. I think that's almost a given. But you can choose to grow blueberries or strawberries or figs or muscadine grapes, and more reliably get good quality fruit without having those sprays. So that's another example of plant selection. Certainly, we know the story of the Leyland cypress and how problematic that turned out to be. So we can choose alternatives. And there are many, like Camellia sasanqua and Nellie R. Stevens holly. List goes on and on. There's a long list of things that are much better than Leyland cypress, which is extremely prone to disease and insect issues. We can also, if we're trying to grow high quality turf, we can choose the right species and the right cultivars that are going to do well in the conditions that we have. In the vegetable garden, we can do a lot with plant selection. The tomato guru, Craig LaHoulier, or maybe it was Charlotte Glenn, actually, in an article that I read from her, but I think Craig LaHoulier would echo this. Cherry tomatoes are pretty reliable to grow. I mean, if you're absolutely intent on having tomatoes, tomatoes can be very frustrating, but the cherry type tomatoes, sun golds, etc., those are a lot more reliable. So we can do a lot through plant selection. We can look at our seed catalogs and make sure we're getting good disease resistance in the cultivars we select. And that's what we're looking at here. I think this is from the Johnny's catalog from many years ago, but it gives you these disease ratings or disease resistance for that particular cultivar. So looking for that. Of course, when I started with extension, we relied on reference books, and these are good, y'all. And I hope you've got some of these on your shelf in the office or at home, because they can be very, very helpful with regards to plant selection. But of course, an amazing tool that's arguably even better is the Extension Gardener Plant Toolbox, which has tons of great information to help you with plant selection. So Ashley, have you guys explored this already?
A little bit, but we can always use more.
Yeah, well, I won't do it in great detail today, but it's got this find a plant feature, which Ashley probably mentioned, and you can really go through there and select the characteristics that you want and find good candidates for um, things that are going to do well for your particular needs or your particular situation. So this is just a phenomenal resource. And I think Lucy Bradley on campus, our consumer horticulture extension specialist, she's the leader behind all this, the originator of this, and she does an amazing job with a team of people helping her out, and is making regular improvements and enhancement to this. So and again, plant selection, is it even adapted to your your location? So obviously bananas we can grow as an ornamental, but not a good choice for fruit selection or fruit production. And we can also, of course, pay attention to plant placement. And again, that's where the toolbox comes in so handy, is you can plug in the conditions, whether it's shady, whether it's dry, whether it's wet, and get good information about plants that are adapted to that location. And here's a great example of poor plant selection and poor plant placement. So this is the growing conditions that those trees were in. And actually what's remarkable is that they lived as long as they did, but it did eventually get, thankfully, torn out and replaced. But placing things where they'll thrive. We can also prevent problems by making sure we're installing them correctly. And I like using this example with this group because this is a plant sample that came in when I was working in Durham. And so this picture was taken there in your Master Gardener office at 721 Foster Street. And some gentleman brought this in, wanted to know why his plant had died. And I think it had been in the ground for several months or a year, and there was no root growth. I mean, he pulled it out of the ground after at least several months, and there was no root growth beyond the roots that had grown in the container when he brought it home. And so that was clearly an issue with installation or post-plant care, where he most likely what happened is he installed it too deeply, or did the ball and socket approach, where heavy clay soil, and dug the hole exactly the same diameter as the root ball out of the pot, and it just drowned or suffocated. So proper installation is just vital. Proper mulching. When we've done the installation, the thing about this picture is I don't see the root flare. So when we install a tree, proper planting depth is crucial to the long-term health and viability of that plant. And I don't see the root flare, which would indicate that should be at ground level. So it's likely been either planted too deeply or over mulched. But routinely, when I would go to a site to diagnose a problem and I'd see something like that, I'd grab my trowel and dig around at the base there and try to see what was the planting depth. Can I find the root flare? Is it buried under 2 inches of mulch, or is it buried under 6 inches of soil? And there's your problem right there. So why is this plant showing some symptoms up here? Browning of the foliage. It's got some good growth on this side, but what's going on over here? People are thinking, oh, I just need to spray something on that. But really, we get into asking important questions like, when was this planted? How was it planted? And if something's been in the ground for a few months or even a couple of years, plant installation is a strong potential suspect that we need to explore more thoroughly. Because whatever's happening down in the root zone can affect what's going on the top of the plant as well. So if we're planting herbaceous materials, whether that's perennials or annual flowers or even vegetables, soil preparation. Soil preparation, of course, is always important, but we need a good loosened soil bed with lots of organic matter added. And do we have it at the proper spacing? Do we have space for it to reach its mature size? That's something we see over and over again with trees and shrubs. People plant things and don't give them room to grow. Do we have good air movement to help reduce, humidity in the canopy of the plant? And that's going to reduce our fungicide risk or fungal disease risk. And then prevention through proper care, mulching, fertilization, all those things. We do have, the science-based methods of how to do that, providing the nutrients that plants need, proper amounts of mulch, good pruning practices. And to be clear, this is not good pruning practices, in case anybody was wondering. I'm sure you weren't, but we got to do that proper care to keep our plants healthy. Good irrigation practices, not overwatering, not underwatering, especially in our heavy clay soils. In the vegetable garden, and even with annual color blip beds, rotation is so important, and not planting the same crop in the same location every year. Ideally, you should have at least a 3-year rotation, and longer is better. Attracting and conserving beneficials, I think, is a good strategy to think about. And that gets into pesticides being something that should be a last resort. So especially when we're using insecticides, we do need to think carefully about, okay, maybe I'm trying to treat a Japanese beetle, but this is also a beetle, and this happens to be a predator beetle. And we don't really want to kill that guy. So when we have the strategy of using them as a last resort, that's going to help conserve those beneficial insects and avoid those off-target effects. I think plant diversity is also crucial. And having there's an old piece of data that I heard probably 20 years ago from I think it was something, might have been more than 20 years ago, but something J.C. Ralston said or discovered, is that you go through and it's probably still true to some extent today. You go through any neighborhood and you see the same plants over and over again. Everybody's planting the same 20, 30, 40 plants. I mean, the plant palette that's actually used, because builders are using the same thing in mass, it's the same things used over and over again. But we as gardeners, we have lots more choices than that. And we can add diversity to our landscapes. And, it's just like your retirement portfolio. You wouldn't put all your investments in one stock, hopefully, although I'm not a retirement professional. But that's what they say, is don't put all your money in one stock. So having that diversity in the landscape, I think, is crucial, and also in providing habitat for those beneficials. And here's an example of not having diversity in the landscape, and we see this all too often. This is a neat little place, southern Warren County. It's an old house that the owners passed on, and in their will they left it to be used as a venue for musical performances. I think it's called Cherry Hill. And of course, I went out and they were concerned about these, I think they're boxwoods planted along, the sidewalk in the front of the house. And that's just a recipe for, inviting problems where you got the same plant, and I understand, this is an old house, very formal looking, you're wanting a very formal landscape. But there's a trade-off here, and there's to do this and have a beautiful, somewhat formal looking landscape where you don't have all your eggs in one basket. And then you've got nematodes and root rot that can come in and really cause issues. Sanitation, I think, is another important tool for pest prevention. So this is frog eye leaf spot on apples, and it's a fungal disease. So if we're trying to grow an orchard, cleaning up stuff that falls on the ground, pruning out, and even on ornamental shrubbery, pruning out diseased plant parts. Early in my extension career, I went to visit went on a training with other extension agents. We went to a farm that was doing greenhouse tomatoes, and he was doing in-ground tomatoes in the greenhouse, but growing them in the soil rather than in pots or bags. And he had no rotation. I mean, his crop was tomatoes. That was his market. And of course, it's hard to rotate a greenhouse. It's kind of a fixed structure. But he was doing it successfully, at least at that time. He'd been doing it for a number of years. And one of his most important tools was sanitation. And I mean, he was going through that greenhouse, I'm sure, on a daily basis, if not a couple times a day. And anytime he saw, any kind of disease, he would clip it out and remove it from the greenhouse. So sanitation is just so important. Cleaning up fallen fruit leaves. Anytime you see a branch or a limb or a leaf that's got some kind of sign on it, getting that out. Here's another example. This is a twig girdler. It's a little beetle. You walk out in the woods or your yard in the fall, and you'll see what looks like the ends of branches just clipped off. Like somebody climbed up into your tree or had a bucket truck and just clipped off the tips of multiple branches in your tree, and you've got all these fallen branch ends in your yard, and we're talking like pencil diameter here or less. And you're thinking, what the heck's going on? But it's this little beetle, and it lays its eggs in those things that fall on the ground, on the branch tips that fall on the ground. And so cleaning those up, getting them out of the landscape is a good sanitation practice. If we were in person, I would ask you to identify what this is. And many of you would say it's a rototiller. And you would be correct. It is also a very effective device for transferring insect eggs, weed seeds, fungal spores from one garden bed to another, fire ants, etc. So cleaning that off between beds, between jobs, is a really good sanitation practice. I don't think it necessarily needs to be like sprayed down with bleach or anything, but at least getting a garden hose or a pressure washer under there and cleaning off the tines in the interior of the machine, where the tines are, real good, is an important practice for sanitation. Especially if you're going from a bed where you've got a known issue. Maybe you've got a bed where you just can't grow tomatoes because there's some ongoing issue with fungal diseases, or you've got a bed that's infested with nutsedge or whatever. All right, so that's the first foundation of integrated pest management, is doing everything we can to prevent pests. So let me take a look at the chat, or Ashley, if you have seen any questions or comments come in that we might want to address.
We did have someone with an eagle eye point out that they thought that was a goldenrod beetle, which was fun. And then you talked a little bit about the tiller. What about things like lawnmowers? Like other tools that have a tendency to spread things?
I think the main issue with lawnmowers would be probably, or the main concern with lawnmowers would be spreading weed seeds. So, from one location to another. So I guess if you've got one area of your yard that's relatively weed free, and you've got another area of your yard that you mow that has weed problems, that might be a consideration. You could mow the weed-free area first and then mow the weed-infested area second, and then clean the mower when you're done. I know a lot of mowers have those little hose connections where you can spray out underside of the deck.
Yeah. That's like in general, if you have, in weedy or infested areas and you have clean areas, it's always a good idea to actually work, clean to dirty. So just if you're thinking about it and if you can manage it, you don't go traipsing through the really infested, gnarly portion and then go over to the wonderful spot-free portion and start clipping everything and doing all that work. Yeah. That was our main question, though.
Yeah, lawnmowers. Now, if you've got somebody that you're hiring to mow your lawn, and they're bringing in their mower after they visited 20 other yards, yeah, you might not have much control over that. But again, I think with lawns, the main issue would be, or the main concern would be weed seeds getting transferred. You could certainly make that request of your turf guy. Hey, be sure to clean off your mower before you start mowing my yard, and preferably not in my yard. So, all right. So the next phase of integrated pest management is monitoring, or the next principle. The main idea here with monitoring is we want to catch problems early, because problems are so much easier to address when they have first started rather than when they have spread. And that's what happens with insect and disease issues is they spread. They spread on the plant. They spread from one plant to another, generally plants of the same species rather than of different species. But if we're keeping an eye on things, um, on a every other day or a couple times a week at least basis, then we can catch problems early. If you've got a beautiful landscape, it gives you an excuse to get out there and enjoy it, stroll through, keep your pruners in your back pocket, and just clip out, and maybe a grocery bag or a bucket, and just clip out anything that looks suspect. So this picture here is what is this, Ashley? Euonymus, and it's got scale on it. Does that sound plausible? Yeah. Um, I'm exercising muscles that I haven't exercised in a few months since I retired. Um, so yeah, euonymus scale. Um, this is something that can be quite problematic on euonymus, but it's also very easy to address if you catch it early and just prune out the parts of the plant that have scale on it. That's a very effective strategy. And if you're out there in your landscape, uh, patrolling or monitoring on a regular basis, you can do that effectively for this and many fungal diseases and many other insect issues. You know, uh, squash bugs in the garden, etc. Little caterpillars in the vegetable garden, and things start out small relative to the size of the infestation. And in the case of insects, they also start out small with regards to the size of the organism. And so a lot of times it takes close inspection. So turning the leaves over, uh, looking along the mid vein of the leaf for the little green caterpillars that are designed to be camouflaged and hide there. A lot of insects hang out on the undersides of leaves because it's sheltered and they're protected. They get some protection there. So just keeping a close eye on things as you're going through the garden, and at that stage, it can just be a matter of picking them off or squishing them or whatever. These are lace bugs. These are not azalea lace bugs. These are eggplant lace bugs, if memory serves. So things start out small, and even a lot of insects are tiny at full grown size. So close inspection, that's what I'm trying to get to. Close inspection. Catching things early. And it can even get to um, uh, looking at things from a um, regional scale as well. And this is really more of a farming example, but when we look at things like downy mildew and cucurbits, there's actually a forecast tool where scientists and extension specialists are actually monitoring weather conditions and monitoring reports of the spread of disease. I'm not 100% sure this is downy mildew, by the way. It's been a long time since I took this picture, but it is a cucurbit. So there are tools available that can forecast spread of diseases that farmers use, and that's another example of monitoring. From a and again from an agricultural scale, there's protocols available where farmers are advised, and this is part of the training we do for farmers is, go out in your field and sample X number of plants, and this is the sampling method. And if you've got an infestation at this level, you need to use this product. If it's below this level, then you don't need to do anything. But anyway, monitoring is a great tool that can be applied to the home garden as well in the landscape. And then the third step is to identify the problem. I love telling this story. Uh, I got a call from someone when I was working, and they said, "I've got this issue. I went to the store and I found a product that I thought would work. I bought it, uh, brought it home, sprayed it. It didn't work. Went back to the store. I got a different product. Used it, didn't work. Went back to the store, and I think they had actually tried 3 different products and didn't work. And then they called me and, "Well, what should I do?" And I said, "Well, you should get a time machine, get back in time and call me first, and let me help you identify it, so that we could find the correct solution." And that's the key because, again, as I said earlier, disease issues can look like insect issues and vice versa. Either one can actually be a nutritional issue, and you think it's a disease or an insect. And we at Extension, we have the tools to find answers. Not all the answers, but in a lot of cases, we can help you find the answers. And this is the typical scenario. The type of question you get. Somebody looks at a plant and they say, "Oh, it's got dead leaves. There's something wrong with the foliage." And so they call Ashley or they call you or they come to the office or they see you at a plant clinic. "I need to spray on this." And of course, this is a root issue. This is probably root rot, fungus in the root system. It's up against the foundation of the Warren County Extension Office is where this picture was taken. And um, it's gutters don't get cleaned and water overflows and you just got a saturated soil there and you got root rot. But you know, we have the tools available to help find them. This was a funny little issue. Somebody called me. This was actually a forest landowner, and they were certain that they had all these plants that were showing similar symptoms, um, and uh, wondering what's going on. They were thinking some fungal disease had come through the forest and affected all these different plants, or some helicopter had flown over and sprayed things. They were making an application to a nearby farm or field, and um, but actually it was just frost damage. So identification really important to try and figure out what's going on and evaluate the issue. And sometimes we're not given the full picture, and that can make it really challenging. And so if you're trying to help somebody solve a problem, you got to do your best to get the full picture. And you've got to ask probing questions and try to fully understand what's going on. So why is the turf dying here? Is it, herbicide injury? Is it fungal disease? Is it an insect damage? Something that fed on the roots. And most of you probably already guessed, it's actually just shade. So we need to make sure we're getting the full picture. It's just a shady spot in the landscape and it's not getting enough sun and the turf can't grow there. So what's going on here? Is it nutritional? Is it viral? What is it exactly? And here again, I don't remember. But maybe it's powdery mildew. Maybe it's a characteristic of the cultivar. So identification is crucial. Magnification is a really valuable tool for identifying issues. It can reveal thrips and mites and fungal structures, and many other things, characteristics of little weed plants that people bring in. So and magnifying glass or a hand lens is especially helpful and, get some practice with it, learn the proper way to use it to be able to see what you want to see. Um, the other nice thing about magnification is when you've got somebody that comes in, to your plant clinic or to the office with a plant issue, it's a great stalling technique. And it also builds credibility for you. If you take the sample and, look at it under the magnifying glass or whatever. So really helpful tool. Gives you time to think, come up with an answer. Um, so, and of course you can use your phone as a magnification tool. Now, one thing, if you're trying to identify an issue, whether it's a weed ID, fungal issue, insect, or whatever, get a good picture. And the way to get the best possible picture is to put your camera as close to the subject as you can while keeping the subject in focus. And most modern cameras can focus reliable with your with the camera held, a couple of inches away from the subject. I mean, literally like 2 inches, and in some cases even closer. And so that really enables you to get the detail. Worst thing you can do when you're taking a picture is pinch to zoom, because all you're doing is cropping and losing resolution. So the way to zoom with a phone camera is to move the camera closer to the subject. And especially when you're taking pictures of small things, a lot of cameras will have this little icon, which is the macro function, and probably a lot of modern smartphones, which I don't really have, will automatically, move into the right mode. In my case, I have to click on the little rose icon or the little tulip icon and to put it in macro mode. And then I can get a good close-up photo. So helpful when you're trying to identify something through a photo. References are good identification tools. See, am I still coming through okay, Ashley? Okay, great. And of course, again, shows my age. Used to use the Ortho Problem Solver and other reference books. And of course, now we have the internet. And I will give you at the end, I've got a great tool to share as far as a good reference tool. All right, another good way to identify issue is, and the nice thing about references is a lot of times you can look up a plant and then see what are the common issues on that plant. And that really helps you narrow things down. Of course, it's challenging when somebody asks you a question, they don't know what plant it is, and that happens. But and that can often be like the first step is, okay, that's what we need to do is first we need to identify the plant. Sampling is crucial. Soil samples through the Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services rather, can help it rule out pH and nutrient issues. And also, plants that are not growing in proper fertility are more subject to other issues. So that can be an important tool. We also have the Plant Disease and Insect Clinic at NC State, which is an amazing resource. And we can send physical samples to them. There is a fee for that, but we can do that. We can send images for free, though. Is that still the case, Ashley? Yeah, so we can send images for free. So again, if you've got a high quality image and you bring it to Ashley or a client brings it to you, and you can't tell what it might be, then we can send that image on to Plant Disease and Insect Clinic at no charge and potentially get a diagnosis that way. And that can be quite helpful. And then assessing the problem, and part of that is thinking about it from an economic standpoint. If we've got a plant that is, key feature in your landscape, it's the tree that your um, grandmother gave you when you um, first moved into your house. Has either some economic value or some sentimental value. That's something that we probably want to spend some time and money on solving that issue, and would be willing to invest in some and pest control products have gotten expensive, of course, just like everything else. So um, thinking about it from that standpoint, how much is it worth solving that issue versus an annual flower bed where you got a 25 or $50 worth of annual flowers that um, are just there for a few months anyway. So um, can't remember what the point of this photo is, but it is an interesting photo because this is damage from the emerald ash borer, which is an exotic invasive. Let's see, we don't use exotic. What's the term we use now for that, Ashley? Is it just invasive? I think we
That's
just call it
what I use. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we just say invasive. But it came from another country, was brought into the United States accidentally. Tiny little green beetle, and if it gets into an ash tree, it's a death sentence. I think this is the point of this picture. And that this picture was actually taken in Person County. I think one of the first first finds of emerald ash borer in North Carolina, or at least in this part of North Carolina. So anyway, if you've got an ash tree in your landscape that's an important shade tree in your landscape, that's a completely different scenario versus the ash tree that's growing way back in the woods somewhere. So potentially the value of that tree to you could be much greater. So assessing the damage, how much is it doing, and then selecting the right control measure. So, and that could be hand removal in the case of, for example, insect eggs in the vegetable garden that we can take out before they hatch. These are the little cocoons of the bagworm. And it's amazing how much you forget in 8 months. I retired about 8 months ago. Bagworms on Leyland cypress, we can clip those and this is part of monitoring, also catching problems early. We can clip those things out. Whereas if we let them go and we don't see them, then they can take out a whole tree and start slowly moving down the row of plants. And they get on more than just Leyland cypress, but that's where we see them most frequently. But there's a little cocoon in that bag. If you haven't already had this topic, there's a little cocoon or egg mass in that bag, and I guess cocoon because it ties a little silk thread around the branch, and then that's what causes it girdles the tip of the branch, and that's what causes the damage. But we can just clip those out. They spread very slowly through the plant, and if we catch them early, we can clip them out and be done with it. Leaf galls on azalea and camellia, there's no reason to spray for those. It's just a cosmetic issue, and so just clipping those out is quite effective. Exclusion can be a good tool. Down on the left, we've got some lightweight remake fabric, which can be used to protect a crop from insect damage. And then top right picture is cutworm, which can damage plants in the vegetable garden. And we can put little collars around the plant to protect them from the cutworm. And then pesticides can be, again, our last resort control measure. And when we are using pesticides and when we're recommending pesticides, we want to try to choose or recommend the least toxic effective option. And I'll talk a little bit about how you can approach that question mark of finding that least toxic effective option. And these are two good examples of low toxicity effective options. Both of these are products that organic gardeners might use. They're made out of the some byproduct of a bacteria that is quite effective at killing many caterpillars and beetle larvae, and very effective tool. Let me at least pause here, Ashley. If not, take a break, maybe.
I think that's
If
fine.
nothing else, just to give my voice a little bit of a rest.
Yeah,
Any questions?
we had two in the chat. So the plant that was by your office building, that had the root rot, do you think it could be saved by digging it up, trimming the roots, and maybe amending the soil, or like, is there any way to save that plant?
Um, so practically speaking, I wouldn't think it would be worth it. um, um, there are, products, fungicide products. So this is assuming that we've accurately diagnosed the problem by sending a root and soil sample to the plant disease and insect clinic. Because you wouldn't want to take extreme measures without a good diagnosis. But if we have identified it as a root rot at a cost of like $20, and then you really wanted to try something, you could use a fungicide drench. There are products that can be applied, fungicide products that can be applied as a drench to the soil. It would be likely expensive and time consuming and labor intensive. And how much is it going to cost to dig it up and put a new plant there? So that's the route I would go, and I would put something that was not susceptible to root rot. And that goes back to plant selection. If we know we've got a site that either has root rot or we think might be, because it's next to a downspout or wet soil that might be conducive to root rot, let's choose something else for that site that's not susceptible. And there are lots of great options.
I can't tell if I just maybe didn't hear you talking about this, or if this question is more interesting than I'm realizing. Deborah, if you have any extra context, the question is, what issues only resolve with fire? I realized, I was like, did I think I zoned out for a
What
second.
what issues only resolve with fire? I'm not sure I know how to answer that.
We will be talking about uh flame weeders next week when we talk about weeds. So we will be talking about fire
Okay.
as an option.
Deborah, you wanna offer more?
Yes, because I was just reading it in the book. They were talking about like the use of like propane gases, and then like they had just mentioned briefly um kind of like small propane torches or like I don't know,
Okay.
in my mind I'm like, oh, a flamethrower. And of course I
Yeah.
would burn a field of spider mites in a second if I thought that that would be, instantly what I needed to do. So I was wondering if there are any issues, since pesticides is the last resort, does
Yeah.
fire go before pesticides? And if so, what issues are like best with fire?
That would be for weed control, Deborah.
Okay.
As Ashley mentioned, there is a device called a flame weeder, and it's actually more of a heat weeder, I think, rather than. I mean, it does produce a flame, but it's more about the heat, and it's good for like killing the plants that come up through the cracks in your driveway, or you know stale bed method in a vegetable garden where you till and then you wait for the flush of new growth and then you go in with the flame weeder and kill the little seedlings that come up. But again, I think Ashley's going to go into that in more detail, but that would be its primary use, I think, or its
Yeah,
really its only use.
I added that to my weeds talk just because like it's one of the more like metal moments you get to have in gardening when you're just like wailing on things with the blowtorch. And there is a time and
Yeah,
place for that. So we'll talk
but
about
there's
that.
there's a tool specifically designed for that. I
Yes.
wouldn't just go out with a like find a military surplus flamethrower or something. Not
Not
a good
without a
idea.
hose. Not without a hose. Cool. So, and then we had a question about can neem oil be used as prevention?
Uh, do you know the answer to that, Ashley? I think neem oil does have both insecticidal as well as fungicidal properties. From an insecticide, it's probably not preventative, but from a fungal disease standpoint, perhaps. And in fact, most of the fungicides that we use, at least that are available to home gardeners, would be preventative treatments rather than curative.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that if you were thinking about using something as a fungal preventative that was organic, I would also encourage looking into copper. It tends to have both fungal and limited, but actual like antibiotic, so like bacterial infection preventative properties. And it can be really helpful for things like when you're getting your tomatoes started and that kind of stuff, and you can't keep enough distance between the soil and the little tomato leaves because the plants are so young. Using something like a copper spray can kind of get you through that period.
And I would say preventative fungus or preventative treatments in general would be very, have specific use cases. Like, for example, if you're trying to grow apples and peaches or those hybrid tea roses, um, maybe tomatoes, there's things that we know are highly susceptible to fungal diseases where it makes sense to go in and spray something as a preventative treatment. But not as a routine kind of, oh, let me just protect all my plants.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of responsible pesticide use is being very targeted in where and why we're using them.
Yeah, and just to I see Jules has one more question about that copper. It's like you'll just see it as a spray typically, like it'll be like copper sulfide or copper sulfate. And it will come as a copper fungicide spray, typically a ready to use like pre-mixed situation that you can find at garden center or big box store. And then we had a question about using copper where crown gall seems to be present on rosemary.
No clue.
Yeah, and my answer would be like, I'd have to look at the label to be totally honest, but I'm hesitant to try and treat. In general, I'm actually somewhat hesitant to try and treat the soil if the problem is in the soil, because I don't know what else I'm messing up about the soil community there. And to me, I'm starting to get a message then that maybe the plant is not the right plant for the spot. You know what I mean? Like I don't know how you would feel about that, Paul, but I feel like I'm starting to have like a right plant, right place itch when I find soil problems.
Yeah, and I think soil in general is hard to treat.
Yeah.
Because it's not like you can just treat the surface. Well, I mean, okay, preen for weed management, that's an effective weed preventer where we're just treating the surface. That has some utility, but when we're talking about insect issues and disease issues, treating the soil, it's not just the surface, it's a volume. And it's a volume that, is hard to get. I mean, it's hard to get to. I mean, because you're talking about enough solution that it goes down into the soil. So that it just seems like a hard medium to try and treat. Plant selection.
Yeah. I'm wondering, do we want to take maybe just like a 3-4 minute break for like leg stretch, bathroom,
Yeah,
coffee,
yeah.
and come back around 10:20?
I'm
Is
in
that fine
favor.
with you folks?
Yeah,
Okay, cool.
perfect.
Awesome. Again, recording started back up and take it away.
All righty. Okay. All right, so those were kind of the principles of integrated pest management and using pesticides as a last resort as one of our control measures. I think it's helpful to understand how pesticides make it to market, because this is a big part of the reason why I think pesticides can be used safely. Because it's not a simple process. Pest registration is handled by the Environmental Protection Agency, which is an agency of the federal government. And it's a very comprehensive process. And for a company to bring a product to market, and there's a couple of caveats, and I'll get into this, but it costs millions and millions of dollars and takes many, many years to bring a product to market. And it involves studies of efficacy, toxicology, environmental effects, et cetera, et cetera. Lots of components to that research process. And this is the thing that I got exposed to early in my career that was really helpful and informed, my work and my views. So expensive, time consuming, and science-based. So, first question is, does this new compound that we've developed in a lab, does it have any effect on a pest? And so we can test that in very controlled conditions, in a lab, in a greenhouse, and make some preliminary determinations. And then we're going to take it out into the field, and obviously not on this scale, but in very controlled, kind of small scale field environments, and do studies there to find out, does this product have an effect on Japanese beetles or corn earworms or powdery mildew or whatever it is we're trying to control or manage. And then, assuming we find a product that does have, or a compound that does have some helpful utility, then we want to look at toxicology. And this is not necessarily, I'm not necessarily taking this in order. in sequential order, but these are the kind of categories of things. So is it harmful to humans? And, we're looking at not only acute, but also chronic effects. Birth defects affect the reproductive system. So we're looking at all these things as far as toxicology testing. So, we get good information. And then if I were there with you in person, I might have brought a spray bottle of water and asked for a volunteer to come up to the front and handed them the spray bottle and tell them to spray out a few squirts of water and then say, okay, now put the water back in the bottle. And of course, you can't do that. So we need to know when we're spraying something, we need to know, is it going to have any effects on the environment? Look at that through studies. And this all happens before the pesticide comes to market. And of course, it continues, once the product, there's ongoing research and new information that sometimes come out and informs new restrictions that we need to put on a product, or in some cases take a product off the market. But again, I think we've reached a point where we're learning incremental pieces of information rather than kind of we're making incremental improvements in protecting human health, protecting the environment, rather than dramatic, oh, this product is killing everyone and everything, let's take it off the market. So what happens to the environment? Does it leach into the groundwater? What happens to that compound? Does it break down through sunlight, or when it's exposed to water? What are those compounds that it breaks down into? Do those have any any effect on the environment? So it's pretty extensive what we're looking at. We're looking at impacts on wildlife and fish and runoff into the water system, beneficial insects. All these things are studied before a product makes it to market. And of course, this is the type of research that the company I worked for back in the early 90s was involved in, is residues on food. So before it gets to market, controlled experiments where spray a product on a crop and send that crop to the lab and find, test for the pesticide residues and determining, are there levels, are they levels that could cause harm to humans? So again, part of the research that goes into developing those products. And so the bottom line is that, pesticides are studied rigorously. EPA reviews that, whole suite of research carefully before approval. And the other thing is that products are re-reviewed periodically. So there have been cases where, and this is happening today, where, one of the trends in agricultural chemicals is that they're requiring certain products to, where farmers have to use what they call lock and load systems, where previously, they would pour the product into a big tank with water to mix up the spray solution. And now there's no pouring. The pesticide container kind of locks into the sprayer. So they have to have specialized equipment, and it just completely, well, it doesn't completely, but it greatly reduces the risk of any contact of that product with the person who's handling the product. So we're getting those kinds of, enhanced technology, enhanced safety information, and that all comes out of that ongoing process of re-reviewing products on a regular basis. And these are all the reasons where I feel like pesticides are safe if they're used correctly and judiciously. But I do want to point out a couple of caveats. And of course, So one caveat is that there is this category of pesticides, and this is something that's developed, I think, probably in the last 5 years, or maybe 10. I don't know exactly, but the EPA has this category called minimum risk pesticide, and these products don't have to be registered. And that gives me a little bit of concern. Well, raises some questions for me as a consumer. If I go to a store and I'm in the pest control section looking for a product and I see one of these minimum risk pesticide products, it hasn't been through any registration process with the EPA. So is it going to have good instructions on it? Will it have been tested objectively for how well it works? And I mean, basically it's on the honor system, so a company gets to decide for themselves, does the product that they want to sell meet the criteria of minimum risk pesticide? Now, there's probably some value to this, criteria or category. There's probably some value to it because, it probably makes things available to gardeners that might be helpful that wouldn't otherwise be available because, you know, a company is not going to spend $50 million in 10 years developing a new product for control of lace bugs on azaleas because the market's not big enough. They're going to emphasize products for soybeans and corn and, where there's some, almonds, where there's large scale production and there's some real economic value, and they're going to get a return on the investment. But anyway, I would be skeptical of a product that has not been mission process and the company's making claims about what it does and how it does it. I probably wouldn't have much of a risk regarding safety, but I would have questions regarding efficacy. So if I was looking at some type of product like this, I would be looking to my extension agent or a university that has done independent research to determine, does this product have any value?
We have
And then the other
question that
caveat,
I think is,
oh, go ahead.
sorry, we have a question that I think is relevant. So how do they know it's minimal risk if it hasn't had that sort of review?
It's the honor system. I mean, the company makes that determination. I mean, the EPA has established criteria. The EPA says if your product meets these however many criteria, you may sell it without registration. End of story. So, all right, enough said on that. And then the other thing is again, this is a EPA is a federal agency. So, all this registration process is handled by this federal agency, and we are currently undergoing significant changes in our federal government. And I'm not going to get into whether those are good changes or bad changes, but it's something to be aware of. And so policies and practices might change at the EPA. Resources might change at the EPA, and that could change things. I'll leave it at that. Okay, but currently, and for products that are currently on the market, we have this registration process, and it leads to a very important document called the label, which basically is all the instructions that you need to know to use that product. And that's true whether it's an organic pesticide or a conventional pesticide. Now, when you order your IKEA sewing table, it comes with a set of instructions, and you can choose whether or not to read those instructions and follow those instructions to assemble it correctly. And of course, the risk is that it falls apart, I suppose. And a lot of people, for lots of different products, they don't bother to read the instructions, and in many cases, the risk is pretty low. But I think in the case of pesticides, they're kind of a special case where we really do need to spend some time reading and understanding the instructions. That said, it's challenging, product labels. There's a lot of information on those labels and the instructions, and it's small fonts, and some of it's a little bit hard to understand. But I think it's important, and I also think that if you'll make a habit of reading product instructions, you'll begin to get familiar with product labels, and you'll see the same categories of information, and you'll start to see, okay, there's some consistency even between brands, or manufacturers about the order of things and the categories of information that's included. And so you get more familiar, and it will make more sense to you, and you'll be able to use that information more effectively. And that's probably anyway. Okay, so I'll stop there. All right. So, and it's more than just using it safely, using it effectively. It's also a legal matter. And if you do make a pesticide application and you use it wrong, you can be fined and you can be held liable for misapplications. And there's real world examples of this where if you're spraying your lawn for dandelions on a windy day and you get some drift onto your neighbor's rose bed, they could be in a position to be able to hold you responsible for replacing those damaged roses. So important to read and understand those instructions. And the North Carolina Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services is the enforcement agency. They do have legal authority in this arena. And if you ever have a concern, you can reach out to them, or you can refer clients to them. Although I think they will tell you, and many people will say, if you can work things out between you and the other party on your own, you both might be better served that way. But anyway, that is an option, if it looks like there's no other resolution. So what is on that label? There's a lot of information on it, and it's all required by law. And these are some of the categories of that information. Lots of safety information, directions for use, how to use it effectively, how to use it properly, where it can be used, what it's going to control, when to use it, as far as what time of year, what stage of growth. And these products aren't cheap in many cases. And so for using them, this is a matter of, getting the value of what we've spent and not wasting our time and money as well. Got directions for use on there twice. So when we look at the names on the label, it's always on the front of the label. It's this section here. pardon me, I need to move something out of the way. But it's this section here, and if we zoom in on it, we'll see the ingredient list. Okay, so the first thing we see is the brand name, and of course that's, in this case, that is Ortho Ground Clear. That's the brand name. But then we can get into the common name and the chemical name. So when we zoom in to the front of the label and we look at the ingredients, this particular product has glyphosate and imazapyr. So those are the actual, chemicals that are included that are doing the weed control work in this product. Glyphosate is the active ingredient in the original Roundup, and of course is also available in many generic products as well. And this is kind of interesting. This is a little survey that Charlotte Glenn did a number of years ago. She had her master gardeners go out. This was when she was an extension agent. She had her master gardeners go out to stores in the county where she worked and just took an inventory of all the products that were being sold. And they looked at 280 products, but there were only 66 active ingredients. So we had 110 brands of insecticide, but there were only 23 active ingredients. 58 brands of fungicide, but only 15 active ingredients. So the idea here is that, it gives you the opportunity to shop around a little bit and to understand, different products. It may just be a matter of, how it's marketed. But do keep in mind that just because things have the same active ingredient does not necessarily make them interchangeable, because there could be differences in the formulation that would make it appropriate to use perhaps in a vegetable garden, but not in a lawn, or vice versa. So you do need to be aware of that. And even if it's the same active ingredient, you do have to follow the instructions for the specific product that you're using. But this does help you become more informed consumer, because you may find, oh, I can get the same active ingredient for, a lower price or whatever. When we talk about choosing, least toxic products, one of the things that we can look at is the signal word. And there's three levels of toxicity indicated by the signal word. There's danger, warning, and caution. You're very unlikely to find a product on the shelf at your garden center or Lowe's or Home Depot that has a danger signal word. Those are pretty much confined to products that would be used by professional applicators that are certified or licensed for making applications. You might occasionally find something with a warning signal word, but most of the things you're going to find on the shelf at your garden center is going to have a caution signal word. And that's always on the front of the label. Here's an example here. So just something to look at before you check out what the product you've chosen is. Does it have a caution signal word to indicate the lowest level of toxicity? Lots of safety information on that label. A lot of times it'll be in a section of the label called precautionary statements. And it'll include information about how to protect your family. So for example, if you're treating your lawn, it might tell you, this is how long you need to keep people and pets out of the treated area. And that might be, you know, as short as a few minutes or up to a few hours. In the case of, you know, some agricultural products, it might be a period of days. But for homeowner products, it's probably going to be a few minutes or a few hours. How to protect your pets, and then how to protect the environment, information about, you know, how far do you need to make sure you're away from, you know, streams and ponds and wellheads, and is this product hazardous to bees or other beneficial insects? It's all on there. So lots of important information that we need to be aware of regarding protecting the environment. Also physical chemical hazards. Is it caustic? Is it flammable? Those kinds of things. And then what to do if you get it on your skin, if you get it in your eyes, etc. And you know, this is part of why I think reading that label is so important, is this is all information that you want to have before you start making the application. And ideally before you even purchase the product, because, you know, that might steer you to choose another product. Storage information, and this is a staged photo, but your action item today for all of you is to go to your kitchen sink and open the cabinet under your kitchen sink. And if you have any pesticides or other dangerous products stored there, remove them and put them somewhere safer. So again, the idea being keep out of reach of children. And so that's a very common mistake I think a lot of people make. What to do with containers, leftover product, excess spray solution. In most cases, empties can be rinsed out and then put in your household trash, and not in the recycling bin. Many communities do have recycling programs for agricultural product containers that farmers might use, but in the case of homeowners, best thing to do is just rinse out the empty containers and put them in the trash. And when you're rinsing those containers, those product containers, you know, you don't want to pour the material down the sink. You want to, like if you're mixing a product into your garden sprayer, rinse out the empty product container and pour that solution into the sprayer, and then spray it out. What to do with leftover product, that's going to go to your household hazardous waste, and if you have excess spray solution. And the best thing to do with excess spray solution is first of all, don't have excess spray solution. Mix what you need for that particular application. But if you do end up with excess spray solution, go ahead and spray it out. So if you're making a turf application for weed control, for example, and you get to the end of the application and you got extra spray, just spray it out on another area of your lawn, and use that up, for example. The last thing you want to do is store it in your sprayer and forget what it was, and then you've got a real issue. What pests will it control? That's an important piece of information, and that's on the label. In many cases, it's good to double check with your extension agent, and find out what's the best or extension references and find out what's the best product or what's the most effective product. Because just because a product claims to control a certain pest, it almost certainly has some efficacy for that pest, but it may not be the most effective choice. Plants on which it may be applied. This is really important. So again, as I mentioned earlier, you don't want to use a product that's labeled for turf in the vegetable garden. The converse situation would be less problematic, although still problematic. But things need to be applied according to the instructions. What's the application method and rate? This is an example of some damage that was done to somebody's lawn because the homeowner had gone in and made a weed control application, and then their lawn care service came in soon thereafter and made a second application. Or I guess the other possibility is that when the application was made, they doubled up and did double coverage on these spots that were damaged. But in any case, this is an example of an improper application, and they got too much product out. Re-entry interval is how long you and other people need to stay out of the treated area. In the case of most homeowner products, it's probably going to say something like, stay out of the treated area until the spray dries, which may just be a few minutes. Or it may give you a specific time period like 1 hour or something like that. In the case of products that are to be used on food crops, there will be a pre-harvest interval, which is the minimum amount of application between, or minimum amount of time between application and harvest. And that could be 0 days, or it could be 30 days, depending on the product. And so that's a really important piece of information to have. Keep in mind when you're reading product labels, there may not be, a specific spot on the label that says the re-entry interval is, or the pre-harvest interval is. It may be worded a little bit differently, but the information will be on there. So that is kind of the information, a quick summary of the kind of information that you'll have on the label. And I hope it does emphasize to you why that's important to take into account and why you do need to spend some time reading that label. Now, when you go to the store to buy your products, you often have a choice between buying a concentrated product or a ready-to-use formulation. So there on the left, we have an example of a concentrate, which is, higher percentage of active ingredient in that product. And so we have to mix it with water to dilute it in our spray tank, our little 1 gallon garden sprayer or 3 gallon backpack sprayer, whatever we have, and then spray it out. The right is an example of an RTU, ready to use product, where we just, in that particular case, we just attach that container to our garden hose and spray it out. There's no mixing. Another example of a ready to use product is one that comes in one of those little trigger bottles. So it's already diluted to the appropriate concentration to go ahead and spray out. In general, it's more cost effective to buy the concentrate. You can treat a larger area at at the same or lower cost. But I would still argue that in this case, the RTU is often, if not usually, a better choice for a home gardener. And the reason is because if you buy a ready-to-use product, you don't have to mix it. And you're also, if you buy a concentrate, it might say, mix, 4 ounces per gallon of water. And really you only need to make 1 application. And so you bought a 16-ounce bottle, you use 4 ounces. Now you've got 12 ounces of product that you have to store. You got to store it safely. And, are you going to need more of it later that season? Are you going to need more of it next season? Or is it something that's going to sit on the shelf for 5 years and then you're going to come back and say, what do I do with this now? And then you've got a household hazardous waste issue. In Vance and Warren counties, we do not have a household hazardous waste program. In Durham, I'm quite certain that you do, so that's something to appreciate. But if you buy the ready-to-use formulation, it's often enough that just the right amount that you can use it up for 1 application or in the course of the season. And then you've got an empty container that, you can rent, pour some water in, spray it out on the site, even though it's, just diluted product at that point, and then throw out the container. So the ready-to-use formulations, I think, are really in almost all cases a better choice for home gardeners. Okay, so at this point, I have a label reading exercise for you. Yeah, we've got time for this. So I think the plan, let me stop and see if there's any questions, and then we'll go to the label reading exercise.
Yeah, so some of the questions were answered just kind of in process. We did have a question about donating extra products to seed and plant community libraries. Just make sure anything is always still in its proper container, properly labeled, with the label still attached. I would be more inclined to like give it to someone directly than just like drop it off at a library, community library site. Like, and by this we don't mean like the public library. We mean like, I assume, Deborah, you mean, where we have neighbors sometimes who will set up places that give away free plants, that give away free things like that. It's almost like the little free libraries, but for plant stuff. I'd be more inclined to give it to an actual person than a drop-off site, a person who wanted it and who knew how to use it, than to leave it that way. But Paul, if you have any thoughts.
Yeah, I think that's a good thought. And then the other issue is, if you've got a product, so products vary in their storage life, or their how long they remain efficacious. But a good rule of thumb is 3 years. So if you've got a product that's less than 3 years old and it's in the original container, preferably unopened, has all the labeling attached, sure, that would be a good candidate to give away to a friend or, some organization. Otherwise, household hazardous waste.
Yep.
The other thing to keep in mind is when we talk about reading the label, and I meant to talk about this earlier, but when we talk about reading the label, a lot of times, and you've seen this, but there's you have to peel off part of the label and it opens up into a little booklet. What I encourage you to do, and what I usually do, is I open that before I purchase it, so I can read all the details. I do it carefully, I do it neatly, so I can reseal it. But that way I can read all the precautions and where it can be used, how to use it, and then make a good decision about, is this a good product for what I need it for? Is this a good match? So if you're giving a product away, you want to make sure all that is still attached.
And then we have one more question that was, can you share any thoughts on horticultural oils? Kind of open-ended.
Very effective for certain pests and an excellent choice for the pests where it is effective because it is, you know, very low toxicity. So yes, it is a, you know, time-honored solution for aphids and mites and mealybugs.
Yeah.
Scale, I think, yeah, it has a lot of that. You know, there's a lot of things you can use it for, and it's a great choice for, you know, you need to be if you're trying to treat house plants, you know, you don't want to use anything. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't use anything other than insecticidal soap or horticultural oil in the house plant.
Yeah. And then I'm wondering if we had a request. Can we do a quick break before we do our exercise, maybe?
Sure.
Yeah. Does that sound good to people? Stretch the legs. I know Zooms can be hard. So let's do we have does anyone have a vote whether we do 5 or 10 minutes? Put it in
Let's
chat.
do 5.
Let's do 5. Okay, so let's meet back at 11:05 and then we'll dive in.
All right, Scott says 7. Let's do 7.
11:07. We're in. Perfect.
Okay. All right. For those of you who are back, you might click on the 2 links I've just posted and make sure that they actually work, and let me know if you're able to access those links. Yeah, okay, good. Great, thank you.
Right, I think we are back.
All right, so I've posted in the chat a link to a real live product label, with the caveat that, you know, never substitute a label that you find on the internet for the label that's attached to the product. But just for the purpose of practice, I find this as a helpful exercise. I've done this a lot with commercial landscapers that come to training to, you know, they have to do continuing education for their pesticide applicator certification. And I think they find it helpful to do that. And I think master gardeners do as well, just to start getting familiar with product labels. And so I've posted a link in the chat to a product label. It's a label that for a product that might raise some questions for you and should raise some questions for you. And we'll talk about that. But I think it's a helpful exercise. And then the other is just a Google document that I created with some questions. And I think Ashley was gonna put you in breakout rooms of about 4 people each. And so that you could work through these questions and help each other out if you like, in your groups. So
How long do we want to be in our group?
10 minutes, maybe.
Okay.
7 minutes,
Sounds good.
11 minutes.
We'll say 10.
I think 10 is more than enough.
Okay. We're good at talking amongst ourselves if that's what it comes to.
Great.
Are we ready to go? Awesome. Okay. So we will see everybody back at, let's say, 11:20 is when you will all be back here.
So again, you got 2 links in the chat from me. One is to the label and one is to the questions. So have at it. Oh, if you actually, real quick, if you want, you can save a copy. If you use Google Drive, you can save a copy of that document to your own account, and then that would allow you to type into it to keep your own answers. But whatever, make a note on a piece of paper, whatever suits you.
And we were just saying real quick that if we realizing we have more people than I thought we did. No, that actually works. If anyone wants to save a copy of that, sorry if you were sent to your breakout room and then called back. But if anyone wants to save a copy, you can do that so you can make your own notes on it. Okay, you're going for real now. I think we have a couple people still coming back from break, but this works. Awesome. All right, I might jump between rooms to see how everyone's doing.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess I could do that too.
It's up to you. It's also sometimes I love group work because it's a minute to like let your brain clear for a second. Just
Yeah. Yeah. All right. I'll just hang out here. The breakout rooms seem to be functioning well.
yeah, it seems like they're on it. At least the couple I jumped in and out of, they were, yeah, I think they're jumping right in, which is great. Yeah.
How much snow do y'all have?
No, like a couple inches, it looks like. Like it's definitely snow, but it's hard because I'm also like right downtown, so things
Uh,
don't accumulate quite the same because it's just so warm.
Gotcha.
Yeah, you said you have like what, 4 inches you said?
Uh, Kate went out this morning and See, we've got about, with a ruler, and we've got about 4.5 inches. Well, that's what we had before it started snowing again.
Yeah, it is like perfect fluffy snow.
Yeah.
It's going down right now, which is really nice. Yeah.
Where are y'all in the course schedule?
Uh, let's see. We started, this is class, like we're luckily into the part of it where like we're in the flow a little bit, which is great.
Mhm.
So this is class 7.
Okay.
So we're almost halfway. We did end up adding another class, so we're 17 weeks now.
Okay.
Um, we've added a class on, it's called volunteering and public engagement.
Mm,
Because like I have this like sinking feeling whenever we would finish class that we had just spent like so much time on horticulture, which was amazing, and then we were like, okay, go talk to people, bye, like have fun.
yeah. Yeah.
So we have a class that's all about um there's some background on even like what is extension and like what are you part of now and like what does all
Mhm.
of this mean, and then there's like some soft skills tough stuff too of like how do you answer questions and like what are the really good follow-up questions to ask,
Right.
because we kind of have it like sprinkled throughout the class but we don't have ever a moment where we really talk about it in a like intentional concerted way.
Mhm.
Yeah, so we're building that class out now because I realize like a lot of people leave and they're like, I'm afraid of public events, and I don't understand that like I'm part of extension. And you're like, okay, cool. Like let's back up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we can
Yeah.
address both of those. So
Yeah.
yeah. Well, and especially like in Durham with us having so many non-traditional programs, I wanted to make sure people knew too that like, if you were talking to a family that had questions about their garden, but you also saw that they had like a couple little kids that, if they seemed interested in Welcome Baby, you could at least tell them it existed.
Mhm.
You know, like you don't have to know that much about it. You just have to know it exists. And that's helpful.
Right. Right. Right.
So yeah. But yeah, I always kind of forget how much like even when I'm not teaching, how much like mental overhead these classes can take.
Mhm. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
So Ashley, where are you guys in groups right now?
yes, we are in groups and they're gonna get called back in a minute.
Okay.
Yeah.
When do we think Tina's gonna do her thing? Hey, Tina, if you're there.
I don't know.
Okay, so kind of playing it by ear.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm on that. No worries.
Yeah. I told Tina, I was like, sign on around 11 and then just hang out. Like you don't need to
See what
be
happens.
listening to the computer. You don't need to actually be at the computer,
Yeah.
Because like with these online classes, it's always hard. It's very hard for me to time moves funny on Zoom is what I've always noticed.
I also think that even though everyone in some ways thinks, oh, Zoom, it'll be so convenient, I'll be at home. I think the Zoom classes are harder.
I think they are.
Because at least when you're in the classroom, you can really get up and move around more. And I think, there's this much more concerted sort of focus that's going on. And, I think it takes some additional mental energy. Oh, there's a group coming back.
What time do you need me to wrap up, Ashley?
I mean, you have until noon, but you can certainly go, if you don't need that much time, you don't I don't need you to like stretch.
Oh, no, I think, okay. Yeah, yeah, probably. Okay, we'll see how it goes.
Yeah. Just, I mean, that's your time. You do with it as you please.
Okay, all right, but you don't have any, like, do you need 5 minutes for wrap up just in case, or 10 or
We
something
actually
like
end
that?
at 12:30, so
Oh, 12, oh, okay,
yeah.
wow, okay. Okay, great. Well, I will end, definitely by 12, but good chance I'll end a few minutes before that.
Whatever works for flexible.
All right, so can I close this window about the breakout rooms?
Yeah.
It's afraid to press anything.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Is everybody back, Ashley?
Yes.
Okay. Now we are at the time where I have to pretend like I know the answers to all these questions. Let's see. All right. All right, I'm navigating my screens here to make sure okay. I think maybe I will just go over this fairly quickly. And give you the answers, but if folks have questions while we're going through this or comments, feel free to chime in or put it in the chat. And if you didn't get all the answers, I actually would not expect you to have all the answers, because this is new information. I may not have covered everything as well as I should have, or I might have not been 100% clear on some things. So don't stress if you feel like you didn't quite get all the answers. So question one is what's the common name of the product? And I briefly talked about common name versus brand name. So the brand name of the product is Bio-Advanced Tree and Shrub Insect Control Concentrate. That's the brand name. But the common name is there in the fine print on the first page of the product label. And I'm having to zoom in to 175%, actually 200% to even be able to read it. But the common name is down at the bottom of that first page, next to where it says keep out of reach of, actually, I should see if I share this. Can I share this? Yeah, I should share this. But it's there at the bottom of the first page next to where it says keep out of reach of children. If you zoom in where it says active ingredients, the common name is imidacloprid. That is the common name of the product. Okay, now stand by while I do a screen share. Okay. All right, so I'm sharing. Are you seeing am I sharing the label now? Okay. Question 2. What is the signal word? So signal word, it's going to be one of 3, caution, warning, or danger. It's always in fairly large print. In this case, bottom of the first page of the label. and the signal word is caution. And that is, as you'll recall, the lowest toxicity level, which is a good thing. Right, next question. Can I use this to control whiteflies on tomatoes? So this question was designed to get you to think a little bit. And of course, the answer is no. Although there on the very front of the label, you see that it does kill whiteflies. There's a couple of places where you can determine that, no, this would not be appropriate for tomatoes. One is, right here in the front, it says landscape formula rather than garden formula. But if we scroll down through the label, here on the second page, it tells you where you can use it, and it says outdoor trees and shrubs. So that pretty much indicates that we would not be able to use it on tomatoes, and that would be, in fact, a pretty bad idea to use it on tomatoes. Next question, how much should I apply to protect an ash tree trunk circumference of 12 inches from the emerald ash borer? And this is one of the reasons that I chose this label, because as I mentioned, the emerald ash borer is an invasive pest, and if it gets into an ash tree, it is a death sentence. And if I had an ash tree that was an important component of my landscape, I might be inclined to use this as a routine preventative control purpose. But here, again, on page 2, on the left-hand column, it gives you how much to use, and it's a ½ ounce per inch of distance around the trunk. So that's a pretty easy calculation. So you'd need 6 ounces total, if my math is correct. True or false? I should wear chemical resistant gloves when using this product. How about everybody just put in the chat a T or an F if they think that's true or false? Lots of T's for true. I don't see any F's for false. But let's look at the label. The label will always tell you what personal protective equipment you need to use. And so I'm looking through this. I'm on page 2 right now. Before you use, nothing in there about personal protective equipment. How to use, nothing in there. Controls, how much to apply. Now I'm going to page 3. How much to apply, how to apply, nothing in there. So I may have missed it, but I've kind of scanned through the label, and there is no indication that I need to wear gloves, chemical resistant gloves, when using this product. And what that means is that through the EPA registration process and the toxicology studies, it has been determined that you may safely apply this product without wearing chemical resistant gloves. That said, I would argue that the statement, should you wear them, is true. You should. I think you should always wear chemical resistant gloves when using pesticide products. Maybe not with insecticidal soaps and horticultural oils, but just a matter of routine, it is a very good idea. But always check the label for requirements regarding personal protective equipment. All right, question 6, is this a ready to use or a concentrate? And if we look at the label, let's see, first of all, is this a liquid or a granule? It is a concentrate. It says it right on the very front of the label. In fact, in the name of the product, it says, and sorry, I'm scrolling up and down too fast. I apologize. It does say it right on the at the very top of page 1, 12-month tree and shrub insect control concentrate. And I keep saying page 1, but page 1 is what you would see on out of the bottle as when you purchase it. So it is a concentrate that has to be diluted with water before you apply it. All right, next number 7, what is the restricted entry interval? Anybody want to put that answer in the chat? When it dries, when dry, yes, that is correct. Let's see where on the label we find that verbiage. Yeah, forgive me. I haven't had to navigate multiple tabs while doing a Zoom in a long time. I'm a little out of practice. What question are we answering again? Ashley, help me.
I think we were on restricted entry interval.
Restricted entry, right? Okay. Let's see where we find that. Somebody give me a page number of where they found that.
I think it's on page 3.
Page
Underneath
3.
how it works, there's like a little no children and dog sign.
Right where you are.
That's it.
Right where you are.
Yeah, that's great. And that's actually a pretty common little icon that you'll find on product labels. Thank you for that help. Children and pets may re-enter the treated area after it has dried. So, on a sunny day, that's going to be a matter of minutes. But you could give yourself an hour to be on the safe side. And if you think about it, it makes sense, because if you were to walk, if you had a child and you sprayed your lawn with a weed killer, and they ran through the lawn barefoot immediately after the application, that would be a terrible idea, because they would be walking through the grass that was still wet with the spray solution. And so that spray solution in liquid form would be more likely to be absorbed into the body, because it's still in a liquid form. Whereas if it dries, probably still wouldn't want my child to run barefoot through the lawn, maybe until the next day. But there's just because of physics and biology, once it's dried, it's not going to absorb into the skin like that. So that makes, there's some common sense there, but also, again, the science is why they put that there. All right, pre-harvest interval. So pre-harvest interval, there is really no pre-harvest interval, because this is not a product that you would use on food crops. Anybody have anything different on that? Okay. So no pre-harvest interval. Do not use on food crops. Question 9, would you classify this product as persistent?
Yes.
And absolutely you would. And you see it right there on page 1, 12 months of insect protection. So that does suggest to you that it has some persistence. And this is a product that, the mechanics of how this works, mechanics not quite the right word, but you apply it to the soil, it's absorbed by the roots and then transported through the tree or shrub, and continues to provide insect control protection for up to 12 months. That is a valuable characteristic from the standpoint of, if I have that valuable ash tree and I want to protect it against the emerald ash borer, I can make one application each year and be done with it. The potential downside is persistent products. They're persisting in the environment for a longer period of time. And if there's any negative effects, then, they're there for a longer period of time. And do you think this product poses any risk to pollinators is our last question. And of course, the answer is yes, absolutely it does. And that's always something that we want to look at. And so where are we going to find that information? Somebody feel free to steer me to the right section.
I think it was on the last page. It had environmental effects and it said deadly to bees.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. So page 3.
No, page 6.
Page 6. Okay.
The last page, post Spanish.
Oh, but surely that, environmental hazard. Okay, great. Yeah, thank you. So toxic to aquatic invertebrates. So you wouldn't want to apply it to near, ponds or streams or fish ponds. Last bullet point in that section on environmental hazards, this product is highly toxic to bees, to direct treatment or residues on blooming plants or weeds. Do not apply product to blooming plants or weeds if bees are foraging in the treatment area. Okay, so again, I specifically chose this product because it is arguably problematic. And, imidacloprid is one of the neonicotinoid products that has gotten a lot of press for potentially being hazardous to bees and other beneficial insects. And so, this is a product, there's a case to be made, maybe to take this off the market for homeowners. I think there's probably some uses in agriculture that we need to keep. That's an opinion, to be clear. But I think there's a case that this is a product that you could take off the market for homeowners, because, our homeowners going to be that, or home gardeners, I should say. Not every home gardener is going to read that label and follow and understand, those instructions. So, but again, if I had that if I had that ash tree that was a key part of my landscape, I might want to use this product. So, all right. Any questions or comments about the label reading exercise?
We did have a question about what persistence means, and I answered it, but I would love if you had anything else to add. So we had a question, if something is persistent, it doesn't wash off with rain and need another application. And I said, well, really it means that it maintains activity for weeks to months. And if you have enough rain, or if you get soil washing off or something like that, it could still move. It's just going to maintain its activity.
Yeah, yeah. You're the term that applies to whether it gets washed off by rain is called rain fastness. And that's a good point to make, is when you're, especially when you're using, well, when you're using any product, especially herbicides, weed killers, it'll say something along the lines of, rain fast in 2 hours or 1 hour or 4 hours or whatever. And so that's, that's a good piece of information to have before you make that application. So again, point of that is to get you starting to be familiar with labels. And, as you can see, they're a little bit complicated. I mean, I'm supposed to be the expert and I'm scrolling up and down, making you dizzy trying to find the information. But it's all there, and you just need to sit down and look through it. Maybe not every single time you apply it, but certainly at the start of the season or the first application of the season. And then if you buy a new batch of it, reread it, because could have been changes to that label, changes in restrictions, etc. So
We had one more question about when is it best to hire a professional to apply these products?
I don't know if there's a best. Certainly there are products in there are situations where you would want to hire a professional because they might have access to products or equipment that you wouldn't have access to. Not really a home garden example, but termite treatments, that's not a do-it-yourself thing. Bed bug treatments, that's not a do-it-yourself thing. If you've got some kind of tree issue, that might be something where you'd want to hire a professional. There are certain products that, you need specialized equipment, to reach the canopy with a bucket truck or a high pressure sprayer, or, that they have equipment that can inject things into the trunk. Or maybe there's a large area that needs to be treated, a lawn area, maybe you're renovating your lawn and you want to do a broad spectrum herbicide across the whole area to get a good fresh start and get rid of existing persistent weeds. And maybe all you've got is a 1 gallon sprayer, so you hire somebody who's got something that can pull behind a garden tractor. If you are hiring someone, you want to make sure that they have a pesticide applicator's license, and you can actually ask them to show you a copy of it. They should have a little card. And that means that they've been tested and they're getting continuing education credits. You can also just go online and look up their information on the Department of Agriculture website. All right, let me finish up the slides. Thank you for your patience with me as I refamiliarize myself with navigating multiple screens. This there. Oops, all right. Okay. All right, so when you've gone through the integrated pest management, approach to things, and you've determined, yes, it has, I have determined I've tried all other options, or there is no other options. I need to use some type of pesticide product. What can you do to minimize your exposure? And so here's some common sense things. Just think about the routes of exposure. Your hands are the area that you're most likely to absorb a pesticide, because you're using them to handle the sprayer and the bottle, the container to pour. If you're using a concentrate, you're using your hands to pour the concentrate into the sprayer. You can also be exposed through inhalation or through ingestion, through your mouth, or through your mouth, as well as you can have some absorption through your eyes. So really you should do this. No, that's really not necessary. Basically, you're going to check the label, and it would not be uncommon for homeowner products to say, wear long sleeves, long pants, and closed-toed shoes, and chemical resistant gloves. And that's probably just a good general baseline. And if you do that, you've really gone a long way to minimizing your exposure. And then, at the end of the day, or at the end of the application, you want to go an extra mile. If you feel like you got any spray solution on your clothes, throw them in the washing machine, and you should be fine. Maybe not with your children's clothes. So that's kind of a good baseline, and or whatever it says on the label. If there's an inhalation risk, and this will be indicated on the label, this would primarily be anything that came in a granule or a dust formulation, then you might wear a dust mask or some type of respirator, like an N95. Again, it'll be specified on the label. If you're doing an overhead application to a tree, you may want to wear a hat or some eye protection, or whatever's indicated on the label to protect. And you also want to be conscious of wind direction, so you're not having solution come back and get blown back onto your body. So you do need to use some extra caution if you're doing an overhead application. So gloves are probably the most important aspect of protecting yourself from exposure. And when you're selecting gloves, you can get reusable gloves, you can get disposable gloves. Make sure they're pretty heavy duty. If you're using reusable gloves, you want to get the unlined gloves. The reason for that, some gloves will have kind of a fabric lining, and if any spray solution gets inside the glove, it gets kind of absorbed into that fabric, and then you really can't wash it out. So it's better to just use the unlined. And another good idea is wash them before you take them off. So it wouldn't be a bad idea to keep a bar of soap in a little plastic container next to your spigot, and at the end of the pesticide application, just wash the gloves like you're washing your hands before you take them off with soap and water. Inspecting them before each use and replace periodically. They're not going to last forever. You might just kind of have a routine habit of getting a new pair of chemical resistant gloves each year, or maybe every couple of years, and throw away the old ones. Already talked about selecting gloves. Definitely do not want to use leather gloves. You also do not want to use the gloves that are the fabric gloves that are kind of dipped in rubber. I love those gloves. I love those for any kind of general yard work, but because they've got fabric on the back, they really don't protect you adequately against pesticide exposure. Storage of pesticides, basically out of the reach of children in some form of fashion. Maybe that's in a cabinet that they can't get to because it's up high. Maybe it's a locked cabinet. I think it's probably ideal if they can be stored, in a garage or an outdoor shed rather than a laundry cabinet inside the house. But I'd say it's a preference, not a diehard rule. What is a diehard rule is never store a product that's not in the original container. And especially don't put it in a drink container. There are, real instances of people that have had serious health consequences up to death from mistaking, including children, from mistaking a product that was in a beverage container. Somebody said, hey, can I, you've got a particular product, your neighbor needs a little bit of it. Oh, let me just share mine with you. And they pour it into a soda bottle. Terrible idea. Terrible idea. Just don't do that. If you ever do have a product that starts leaking, the original container, the storage container starts leaking, you can just put that container inside of a bucket or something, maybe with a lid. Or if you do want to transfer it to another bottle, maybe like a laundry jug or something like that, just take a Sharpie and write down what's in that container so that and so that when you take it to the household hazardous waste collection, they can see what it is. As far as disposal, never down the drain. Do keep in mind is buy what you can use occasion or see. The products they do have. Am I still with you, Ashley? Every now and then I get a.
You're starting to break up. Like
okay, let me. Okay, I turned off my video. We'll see if that helped, but please let me know if it continues. So products do have a shelf life. And if you could just get in the habit of buy what you can use up in a single season, you've eliminated the storage issue. You've eliminated the shelf life issue. And also try to mix up what you can use in a single application, because it's really not a good idea to store spray solution. And then your unused product, take it to household hazardous waste. There's also, if you happen to be in a county that doesn't have a household hazardous waste program, the Department of Agriculture does have a pesticide disposal program, and you can contact your extension agent for more information about that. All right, so you need to follow Ashley's lead on making pesticide recommendations and whatever policy she has in place. So you can chime in, Ashley, if you have anything to say on this. But in general, if you're at a community event and someone approaches you, as a master gardener, you're there as a master gardener, and a member of the public approaches you with a question about controlling a pest. You need to make sure that you're using some type of extension reference to make that recommendation for a particular product. And of course, go through IPM, ask them about, have you tried, if it's a situation where hand removal or sanitation or plant selection is the better choice, say those things. But if it gets down to, okay, I've got squash bugs on my squash and it's a heavy infestation, I need to treat them, you need to make sure you're using extension reference. If there are multiple options, we don't want to be biased and favor one over the other unless there's a low toxicity option. I think that's a reasonable decision to make, as a recommendation is this is a better choice because it's lower toxicity. Or, if there's something that's more effective, that's certainly an option. And, in general, we don't want to be recommending or favoring certain brands over another. So, where we can try to give common names rather than brand names, or at least make them aware that, Acme bug killer will work great, but read the label because there may be a generic version available that's less expensive and works just as well. People get confused sometimes when you say, look for imidacloprid, or look for, imazapyr, or permethrin versus look for acne bug killer. But at least let them know, I would say, that they might be able to find a generic version or another brand that has the same active ingredient. And how can you be safe? Oh, I'm almost out of time. So top 10 ways to be safe with pesticide. Use as a last resort. Choose your least toxic product. Buy only what you need. And Ashley does have this in PDF format, and she can share it with you in case you want to go back and look at it. Use those ready-to-use formulations where available. Wear the recommended personal protective equipment. If you're using a concentrate, use extra care when mixing. Mix what you need for that single application. Avoid drift. I think it's a good idea to have a spray-free buffer around well heads if you have a well. Observe your restricted entry intervals and pre-harvest intervals and store safely. This is a great resource right here on pesticide toxicity and environmental effects. It's unbiased, it's extension-based, really great resource addressed towards, general public, lay people, information about specific products and active ingredients and what kind of risks they might pose. So I think that's a great resource. Encourage you to look at. Also, as a reference tool for identifying pest issues, I think the Clemson has an outstanding set of fact sheets where here's all the common diseases of tomatoes and how to control them. Here's all the common insects on azaleas and how to control them. So I think those are some good resources. Lastly, I just wanted to end with some things that don't worry me and some things that do concern me. And things that don't worry me are pesticide residues on produce. So when I go to the grocery store, I buy lots of vegetables. Vegetables are good for you. And I am better off eating lots of vegetables than worrying about whether an organic versus conventional tomato is the right choice. Just give me a tomato, all right? Because I know that's healthy. I mean, it's a no-brainer. Eat lots of produce. And I'm not worried about getting cancer from pesticides. I think farmers and landscapers and farm workers, that's a different scenario. But home gardener, somebody who likes lots of fruits and vegetables, I don't think that's something that you need to worry about. And another thing that I don't worry a lot about is farmers using pesticides. Farmers have to use pesticides. We depend on farmers for our food supply. There's some things that could be done better, but for the most part, farmers are using what they need. They're using them strategically. Pesticides are expensive, profit margins are extremely thin, and they can't afford to be wasteful. So they're being very strategic, I think, for the most part. So these are things that don't worry me. But things that do concern me is when we're making kind of those routine just in case applications. I think that happens a lot. Sometimes in farming, but a lot of times in turf care, in landscaping, and even for home gardeners. When I go to the store and I see people buying bags of insect control granules for the lawn, I just think that's terrible. The attitude that pesticides are an easy instant solution, that concerns me because it just goes against the IPM approach. Broadcast applications instead of spot applications. I think many times we can be very targeted in our application. That reduces how much we apply. And another concern is home gardeners who don't read, understand product labels, and they're complicated. And education is key. And it's a tall order, but I think it's an important one. And I do worry a little bit about farmers, farm workers, and landscapers because they're doing this professionally, and the exposure risk is much higher in those fields, and those people, they need to be more careful. It's something that we need to be aware of, and as a society be thinking about, in my opinion. So. And loss of beneficial insect habitat. There's a lot of emphasis on the effect of pesticides on beneficial insects, but I think habitat loss is a much bigger issue that we need to think about. And that is the end of my slideshow and my time. I thank you for your attention and putting up with my dizzying navigation and my gravelly voice that has not been used in this capacity in some time. So wish you great success as Master Gardener volunteers.
If you have a minute, we have a couple of quick questions, I think.
Sure.
Cool. So we'll talk about pre-emergent herbicides next week. So I'm gonna, Tim, we'll get to it. We'll get to it if that's okay. And then you recommended storing pesticides in a garage or shed, and someone did have a question about temperature swings.
That's why I say buy what you can use in a single application or a single season, and why I favor ready to use over concentrates.
Yeah, absolutely.
But if you do have to store something, read the label. It should give you some indication about temperature swings, ideal storage conditions.
Yeah.
So just pay attention to that. And if you think it might have been exposed to improper storage, take it to household hazardous waste.
Yeah, absolutely. I in general, I think having a extreme willingness to go to household hazardous waste is always a good practice with pesticides. And then do most things have an expiration date? I think this is about your 3-year comment, or should people just be writing the date of purchase?
Oh, that's a great idea. Take a Sharpie.
Yeah.
Anytime you bring a product home, and write down on the product when you bought it. And I think I don't think pesticides, I don't think the products have an expiration date printed on them, but if I have something that's more than 3 years old, I'm going to be inclined to want to get rid of it.
Yeah.
Or use it up.
Yeah. Yeah, we started doing that for all of our condiments and other things in our fridge. Also wonderful. You never have to wonder how old that mustard is. It's great. So those are our major questions. Thank you so much, Paul. That was absolutely wonderful. Excellent as always. We have so many thank yous in the chat. So
Yeah.
Awesome.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. So with that, don't worry, Paul, you don't have to learn about office duty unless you really want to.
Okay. Yeah, I'm out of here. Bye.
Bye. Like Paul mentioned, he did share his slides. If you go to the initial training page on the intranet, if you click the header actually for each different topic, that's a folder that holds any slides or any other resources we have for that. So the slides are uploaded there, as well as the little sheet we were working off of if you want to review that. So that's all there, and obviously the recording will be up later. two quick things I want to share really quickly before we turn it over to Tina. We had a comment about pine straw sales. Do you want to share that, Rebecca?
Absolutely. I'm trying to put it in the chat. What I have is too long. Let me see. So the Boy Scouts Troop of 424 in Durham, they always sell pine straw. And I had mentioned it in class to a couple of colleagues, and there was interest. And so essentially there's another week to order. And let's see. All right. I have, it's like 2,000 characters too long because it was a long email. Anyway, the quality of the pine straw is great. I'm going to cut this down and then let's go on with the next thing because I don't want to take everybody's time. But I just need to cut this down a little bit and then I'll send you everybody the link in the chat.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Or you could always send it to Ashley and she could put it in the thing that.
That's true.
Whatever works.
Yeah.
All right,
whatever's
thanks.
easier for you.
Yeah, no time pressure. And then the other question we had that I just wanted to address really quickly, and I'll do this with a share screen, is I know that some of you started getting the emails about signing up for things, which is very exciting. And then the question became like, the plant sale sounds great. How do I actually sign up for the plant sale? So I'm going to show you how you do that. So this is the Durham County page for the intranet, and there are actually two different ways to sign up for things here. So one is if we scroll down, boop, 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 and go to show calendar right here. This is where you can see all volunteer opportunities that are coming up. Anything that is green is a volunteer opportunity that has things still open. Black is a volunteer opportunity that's full, and blue is an education opportunity. And those codes are down here. And so if I wanted to sign up for the plant festival, say, I would come and the email announcement you got was that it is on. Okay, if I wanted to sign up for the plant sale, say, because the plant festival actually doesn't require as many people and is full, I'd come to the plant sale that's on Saturday the 5th with some setup the day before, click on plant sale, and then I can go ahead and sign up. So I would click this, I would sign up, easy peasy. The other way you can always sign up for things, because there's a lot of stuff here, this is a lot to navigate through. So if instead you say, well, what I really want to do is I want to sign up for the plant sale. I know right off the bat, I want to sign up for the plant sale. I don't want to have to navigate through a million things on the calendar. You come over here and you find plant sale. You scroll down and then it has its own calendar page. And the only thing on its calendar pages are the plant sale, right? Like nothing else is showing up here. So now I come here, plant festival is there because they're like the same thing basically. And then here's plant sale. So that's really helpful if you ever want to sign up for the plant sale, or if you want to sign up for a public event, or if you want to sign up for something where you don't want to have to see the whole calendar, you just want to see the opportunities for that type of event. You can always find it here on the left and sign up for just that. Does that answer the question? Cool. All right. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing and I am going to, oh, and to answer your question, you do not need to be signing up for volunteer opportunities during training. You definitely don't. You can do your hours when you're done with training. If you're interested at all in signing up for the plant sale, and you like a crazy chaotic event that's fun, I would recommend like thinking about it or going ahead and signing up for it. A lot of our, it's basically our biggest event of the year. It's a good way to meet a lot of new people. You do need to be able to tolerate some level of lots of people in chaos. So if like that's not your moment, then maybe don't sign up for the plant sale. But a lot of people find it really fun to kind of see everyone and see the kind of the big show in a way. So that's my pitch, but you certainly don't need to be signing up for anything. So which is actually a good segue for a very different type of volunteer opportunity. We're going to be talking about the office today. And we are being joined by Tina Falker, who is our amazing like office queen, really. I mean, she rules the roost over there. So Tina, I'll let you take it away.
All right. Thanks, Ashley. So what is office training? Office training will give you a taste of what you might experience as an office volunteer. We'll talk about some of the tools and resources available, and we'll look at a few examples of questions that came in and the answers provided. I hope that many of you will want to experience a shift or two in the office under the guidance of an experienced office volunteer. But even if you don't, I think you'll gather a few nuggets from this training that will be useful to you as you volunteer in other ways. So how do you sign up for office training? Thank you for that lead in, Ashley. That was really helpful with the intranet. Office training is available every Tuesday morning from February 25th through May 20th. And it'll last about 2 hours, but I'll be available for the entire shift if you have questions and want to stay a little bit longer. Sign up using the intranet. Look for an event labeled Office Training. There are slots for 3 students per session. So if Tuesdays don't work for you, please let me know. Send me an email and tell me which days you prefer, and I'll schedule additional sessions as needed. But bear in mind, as we get into the year, the office duty calendar will fill up. So if you know you can't attend one of the scheduled trainings, let me know soon. We'll have a better chance of being able to schedule a shift that works for you. We've been asked, when can you start volunteering in the office? Well, after attending an office training session, that's the first step. Then you can begin volunteering with an office mentor, and I'll talk more about that during the office training session. But please wait until after March 18th. You'll be about halfway through your training. You'll be a little bit more equipped to do office duty. Are there any questions? No? All right.
I have a question I missed when you said it's starting in February. How did it go? The training Tuesdays through when?
Yep. It'll start next week and it'll go through May 20th.
Thank you.
So if there aren't any questions, I'm looking forward to seeing you all, and I'll see you in the office. Thank you.
Awesome. And I, in addition to absolutely recommending that everyone try the office and try an office shift, I will also say that in a couple of weeks, yeah, the signups are on the intranet, on the calendar. Jimmy just asked. In a couple of weeks, we'll review a document, or like in the coming weeks, we'll review a document that are kind of like things you need to be accomplishing this year. And we all know that we need 40 volunteer hours, 2 general membership meetings, and this covers our education hours. But on that list, you'll see that we actually basically, I mean, I'm going to say it, we require office training. Like, we need you to go through office training so that you've at least seen this. It's also a really, really excellent training. If you're never going to work in the office training that Tina puts together is phenomenal in terms of showing you research resources, showing you how to find research-based information, kind of like what are things that we use kind of as volunteers all the time. So you need to just, Donna's question, you need to attend a single office training. We have them set up Tuesdays through May basically. But if you need another time, like Tina said, just reach out to her and she can find another time that works for your schedule. Just reach out sooner rather than later. It's always easier to get these things on the calendar sooner rather than later.
Hey, Ashley.
Yeah.
I know you just demonstrated how to sign up for the plant sale, but I think as extra reinforcement, if you could also demo going over to an office training,
Love that.
I think that would super help everybody.
Sure. Can do. So, and the other thing too is, you guys, it's great because it is a volunteer opportunity, right? So this is kind of one of the easiest ways for you to start getting those volunteer opportunities. Okay. So remember,
And you'll notice it's not office duty. It's office training.
It's important. Okay. And I actually forgot to tell you, there's a third way. I'm going to show you a magic third way to get to calendar stuff. You can go up here and you can just click calendar. Takes you right there. Whoa. So practical. So easy. So what you're going to be looking for is you're going to be looking for office training, right? See these green slots. And so you would go here, you would click office training, you sign up, you're good to go. So these slots are on there through May, through most of May, and just go ahead and sign up for one, get it taken care of. If you need another time, reach out to Tina. I'll include her contact information in today's follow-up email. And it's just going to be a really nice way to start easing into volunteering and to finding research-based information and kind of learning how to do some of that research. And Tina is a like very nice, easygoing, kind of even-keeled teacher, so it's like a very easy learning experience. The slots are morning slots, but again, Tina's flexible, so if you need a different time, you just need to do that. And so we have a question about how often are Master Gardeners doing office duty. We actually have office duty 2 shifts, 1 or 2 shifts a day every weekday. If you come and you do your office training and you're like, this speaks to my soul, right? You can do as much office duty as you want. Once you've done your training, you're not technically required to do any office duty. We do encourage you to try it. And also office duty is a really, really, really easy way to knock out your hours. Because office shifts, basically, if you do 1 a month, you will cover your hours, right? And so office duty is a really, really great way to kind of, it's fun because you actually get to talk to people, you get to research stuff. It's a little bit lower stakes because you have time. It's not like someone asking you like, what is this problem right now? It's like someone sends you an email and you get to like research it and think about it and go get a drink of water and like go to the bathroom and come back and like write up your little response, right? Like you have time. And it's a nice practice to get into because if you did even, 4 or 5 shifts a year, like you've knocked out almost half your hours, right? If not more. So it's a really easy way to kind of do that. So, but I will include Tina's information in the follow-up so you can contact her. We just set those slots as a way to kind of try and consolidate people, but if it doesn't work for you, like we'll figure something out. Do we have any other questions? All right, thank you, Tina. Awesome. Okay, so we made it. We made it through another week. We survived. I will send out the follow-up email later today. We will be back in person next week. We'll be doing weeds, and that'll be kind of the finish our trifecta of diseases, IPM, and weeds. Well, I guess like a quadrifecta because it included insects, but we'll be kind of changing gears a little bit after that. But that should be a fun one. We'll have a hands-on activity for the second portion, so that's good. And I will be able to stay around for a little bit afterwards if anyone has any questions. But I think unless anyone has any questions for the good of the order. Miriam?
I have a question about the project, so I didn't want to ask it to me. If we feel like we've learned that our plant selection for our project really is dependent on looking at the sun ratio once the trees have leafed out, can we submit our project saying this is pending because it hasn't happened yet?
Yes. Yeah. Make your best guess and then say like, we'll obviously have to review.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like I'd like to see that you're like, the sun is higher, so it'll be a little bit different. You know what I mean? Like, but I don't need you to be like, it's going to go out exactly to this line. Like the shadows, you know what I mean? Just kind of evincing that you understand that leaves change and that sun patterns change.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Jules?
Hey, Ashley, for March 29, the African American contribution to horticulture or whatever the word is, I am already working with Carter at the library. We've been working on this since last September. There is some kind of either movie or panel the night before that Friday evening. I don't know if people know about that. And also, we can still use some volunteers. I don't know whether or not we can use that for volunteer hours with you guys. But the last time I spoke with Carter, he said he can also use a couple more people. He's already having Master Gardener there.
Yeah.
Especially they're going to also do a seed swap at the end, but it is more like maybe the day before that afternoon, Friday afternoon, to set things up, to just get, copies made or like to just a couple people to just do the running around. So I'm just putting it out there. People can see me if they have any questions.
Awesome. That's what I was going to ask. So if you have questions, so that gardening symposium, I'll include information about it again today in our follow-up. It's going to be really great. The Master Gardeners Cooperative Extension and Durham Garden Forum are actually all sponsoring it, helping to sponsor it. So we're totally on board. If folks want to volunteer, I'm not sure if it count for Master Gardener's hours. I have to think about that for a minute, but reach out to Jules and I'll share kind of the general registration info for it.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. And then the last question is, I see in the chat is, we do have Plants, Pests, and Pathogens webinar that is starting next week. That's a monthly webinar that Charlotte Glenn, Matt Bertone, and Mike Munster put together and kind of the state program puts together. It's phenomenal. If you were not in a training year, I'd be like, just get all your ed hours watching Plants, Pests, and Pathogens. I like to watch it anyway. You can sign up for that on the internet, and I would absolutely encourage you to do that if you're interested. They also share recordings afterwards. It's just kind of a nice way to like stay in touch with kind of the most current up-to-date stuff and what's going on out in the landscape. So take a look at the schedule for that. All right, I think some of the questions I see in the chat are more one-on-one now. So I'm gonna officially say, like, I know you guys are good students. We are done. You don't have to stay any longer.
Can I ask you a quick one, Ashley? This isn't for the
Yeah.
students. If I
Yeah.
could,
And Donna, I'll answer yours. But yeah, yes, Tina.
I just have a few comments that might help them in the future for signing up for office duty. Can I email those to you to include in your